Blog Talk Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday night. We are getting towards the end of 2017. I am your host, Yvonne Mason, and this is Off the Chain. That opening song is called Footprints in Me, and it was written and performed by my nephew, Mark Stokes. If you've not yet had the opportunity to listen to him, look him up on Facebook. He's also, I believe, on CD Baby, maybe Reverberation, maybe even iTunes. This young man is an amazing, amazing music artist, and he performs up in North Georgia, up in Blairsville, and coming and up in that area. So check him out. Footprints in Me by Mark Stokes. Well, This is the next to the last show for this year. Tomorrow night we will have graphic designer James Carlson on for the very last show of the year. And the show's not even 2 years old yet. It's amazing where we have come in the last year and a half, and I am so grateful and so thankful for each of you, listeners and guests, who have made this show a success. I say every day that it is not my show, it is your show. I could sit here and talk all night long and nobody would pay attention, but yet y'all come and listen to my guests and listen to what they have to say, and you support them, and you listen when they come back, and they gain a following, and I am so, so proud and so appreciative. And because of all of y'all and the show, this morning when I ran our numbers just for the show itself, this doesn't include the podcast, but just for the show itself, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached 85,310 listeners. Now let that sink in for just a moment. The show is not even 2 years old, and we have reached almost 90,000 listeners just on the show by itself, with our biggest audience being Australia. Thank you guys so much from down under for continuing to support this show and support our artists and show your love to them. It is so humbling that another country would out-listen the good old USA, and I'm very, very appreciative. So appreciative that I continually tout a local band out of Australia. They are the Teskey Brothers. And if you haven't heard them, I encourage you to. They are a blues band that really should be on Bourbon Street, because when you listen to them, you are transported back to New Orleans during Mardi Gras. They are a combination of B.B. King and Robert Johnson, Otis Redding, Johnny Lang, and Eric Clapton, all rolled up into a nice, neat package. They will just take your breath away. They are such a good blues band. So if you have not yet had the opportunity to listen to them, check them out on Facebook. Check them out on all of the music sites. They're on iTunes, Reverb Nation, CD Baby, and they're the Teskey Brothers. And this is the time of year, ladies and gentlemen, when people sometimes are at their lowest. So there is a young lady that has a podcast. Her name is Cece Chamberlain, and her podcast is called Inside Your Life with Cece. She can be found at www.podcast.com, Inside Your Life with Cece. And her podcast is full of thought-provoking interviews, which are motivational and inspirational. They are made to inspire others and to lift up your soul, with feel-good stories and conversations to strengthen the mind, body, and the soul. She wants to inspire and motivate because these are far and few between for many. However, the Inside Your Life with CC podcast is the glimmer of hope in a world full of confusion and discouraging times, or just plain old tough days, and we all have those, ladies and gentlemen. CC's interviews will entertain you, lift you up, and bring the absolute best out of the world. Her podcast can also be found on iTunes and Google Play. Now, if you want to come on this show, you can reach me at offthechainradio@yahoo.com. However, if for whatever reasons you can't, or a little bit leery, go to advertisecast.com and look up Off the Chain. My rates are so reasonable, you will think that I'm giving it away. A product for a solid month. No matter how many shows I have in that month, I will run your ad for that entire month from the day that I get the ad. Doesn't get any better than that, because if you go to most places, it will run you $300 for a week. So check us out. Advertisecast.com, Off the Chain. Now, on January the 5th, at 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, if you have Investigation Discovery on your television or can stream it online, you want to do that, because there is a show called Married with Secrets. I will be on that show. I will be discussing Florida's first serial killer, Gerard Schaefer, who killed between 9 and 35 women between 1966 and 1972. He was married and he did have secrets. He was a Martin County deputy and his boss didn't even know what he was doing. His wife didn't know what he was doing. His friends didn't know what he was doing. So if you have not yet read the book Silent Scream that talks about 9 of his known victims, 3 of which will be talked about on the show, go to Amazon.com. You can download it or you can order the print copy. It's also on Barnes & Noble. And read the book before the show. You will have a better understanding of what we are talking about when it comes to Gerard Schaefer. Now, with all that housekeeping, tonight's guest, I believe in divine providence, ladies and gentlemen. Things happen when they're supposed to happen. And tonight's guest is a prime example of divine providence. For many, this is a very bad time of year. For whatever reason, many people don't like the holidays. Maybe there's been deaths at that time. Maybe there's manic depressive episodes at that time. Maybe there's job loss. Maybe there's a divorce. Maybe there's illness. Maybe there's, for whatever reason, people do not like this time of year. I am one of those people, but I'm muddled through. So there's been a couple guests on the show and we talked about this, and I believe that things are put in place by God when we need them, and this is a prime example. Author Andy Daugherty, he is a full-time IT project manager, and he has a bachelor's degree in computer science and a master's degree in education. His real passion is Christian ministry, teaching and serving in the local church. He grew up in church, and over the years he has served as a teacher, a deacon, an elder, and now he is a minister. He is what they call now a bi-vocational. In addition to his professional job in Atlanta, he also served part-time at McDonough Christian Church as community groups minister, organizing groups, supporting and coaching group leaders, and encouraging discipleship. His current role at McDonough Christian Church is campus groups minister. He is part of a growing trend in churches. And there is a quote by Dr. Thom Rainer, and it says, "We will see in 2015 an accelerated trend of other church staff becoming bivocational." Andy lives with his wife, Terry, in a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, and they have 2 grown children. And the quote is this, and this is by Andy, quote, "Think because I am a bivocational minister and because I have grown up in the church, educated in my faith within the church rather than in formal seminary, this makes me well qualified to write this simple book on Christian living. I've already used this book as a tool in my ministry to bless fellow Christians. Now my goal is to see it used by others." Ladies and gentlemen, the name of his book is called Before God's Face. See, I can't talk. It has received good reviews from both casual reviews and professional reviews. The book is available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon or Nook on Barnes & Noble. Welcome, Andy. Thank you for joining me for an hour tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me tonight.
You are quite welcome. This time of night I get tongue-tied for some reason. Some nights I can talk better than others, and tonight's not one of those nights. So if I stumble, just we'll laugh about it and move on.
Absolutely. I may do the same.
It's just let's talk about Andy for a few minutes.
Okay. What can I tell
you? You have a bachelor's degree in computer science and a master's degree in education. Plus, and ladies and gentlemen, being a minister is not easy because you have to be ready at a moment's notice to give an answer. So, as a child, Andy, did you set your path to get a bachelor's degree in computer science, a master's degree in education, and become a minister? Or was it something that you took a detour and did?
Well, yeah, one of my, the answer would be, a simple answer would be no. my life has this recurring theme, which is that I start off trying to do one thing and then discover that I really should be doing something else. So originally, when I was a teenager, what I really wanted to be when I grew up was a pilot. I love to read stories of pilots, and especially, fighter pilots in World War II and things like that. But I did have my head on straight to think, I would love to be an airline pilot. When I got to be about 16 or 17, I realized I didn't have the eyesight to do that. So I did change my career path to be, to be a computer science major, and I went into application development, got my degree at Georgia State. But then after a few years, I became unhappy at that, and I found this desire to want to teach. And this is one of those examples where my spiritual life, my ministry, if you will, even though I was just in my 20s, was going to affect my professional life. So I enjoyed teaching Sunday school, and yet I had all these technical capabilities, and so I thought, what if I could put those together and teach technical aspects to people? And so I did wind up with a better job. I left IBM and got a job at PeopleSoft, and that was a fantastic job because what I was doing is I was actually traveling and I was teaching like a consultant, and there I learned sort of the vocation of teaching. And so, I started off trying to do one thing, being a pilot, and sort of settled for something different, going into programming. Then after not enjoying that very much, I found that I wanted to teach, and I kind of stumbled my way into that job and really thrived in that job. And so I worked there for 8 years, and then they got bought out by another company, Oracle, and I wound up at another company, and then from there, they said, we're willing to invest in you, and we're willing to reimburse you, and you can get your master's degree. What would you like to get your master's degree in? Would it be business or would it be education? And so I went down the path of education, and they reimbursed me, but it just never turned out to be that great job path I thought it was going to be. So that's kind of how I stumbled into my next job, which was project management. So anyway, I don't want to talk for too long. I don't want to ramble on and on, but there's this recurring theme in my life that I start off doing something, and then I discover that I'm really not as good as I thought at one thing, and I enjoy doing something else. So I stumbled into project management, and then when it comes to ministry, I've always been in the church, and I've always been, since my teen years, serving in the church. But one thing that I think I've discovered is that everybody, I believe, has a spiritual gift. Everybody has something that God can use them to bless the church with. And I kind of stumbled across figuring out that teaching, just simple teaching people my own age, sometimes younger, sometimes older, but teaching is something that I'm good at, that God has given me that. It's not something I have, that I can brag about. It's something that God gave me. Just like some people know how to play the piano, or some people know how to dance or sing or whatever. Singing is not so good with me. Teaching is pretty, you wouldn't want to hear me sing. But teaching is something that I'm good at. So there's kind of how I stumbled into where I am.
Would it be fair to say, and I go back to my craft, which is writing. And in my craft, as I'm plotting a story, if I'm not plotting it the way the voices in my head tell me to plot it, I can't do it. It will not come together. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong. So in those terms, even though you had a path mapped out for you, you had this idea of and you were pretty focused on it, that was not the path that was chosen for you.
Right. Yeah, I do feel like God kind of led me into teaching, and then I think he led me into, there was a time where this is kind of funny, I wasn't a project manager, but my current manager, who knew I could teach well and that I was real structured, I love to plan things out, and I'm really one of those planners. he kind of had faith in me and said, I'm gonna send you to school and you're gonna get certified to be a project manager. But then I don't want you to be a project manager. I want you to teach people who are non-project managers to manage projects. And so that's how I kind of stumbled into project management. So after I did that for a while, got certified, taught it for a few years to help people who were not project managers actually manage small projects, I stumbled across a job, just like you said. It was a great introduction. I believe in God's providence. And I stumbled across a job within my current company where I could be an actual project manager. And I kind of got the bug and decided to do that. And so that's where I've been for the past 5 years, being a project manager. And so that's kind of how I stumbled across project management. The teaching made me stumble across becoming an author. So sometimes, most of the time, I like to use Bible stories and Bible lessons that are already published by big companies like Lifeway and Zondervan and people like that. But there are times when I kind of want to do something different, and I'll write it on my own. Well, sometimes it flops, and sometimes it does well. And in 2012, a lot of things were rattling around in my head, and I decided to create this lesson series called Coram Deo, based on this phrase that I had learned from Charles Colson, who wrote a book that I read back in the 1990s called The Body. It is a fantastic book about the church and all of its problems and where we should be and things like that. And it just really affected my faith. It really inspired my faith. And so that had been rattling around in my head for years. And then someone introduced me to John Ortberg, another wonderful Christian author who wrote a book called God is Closer Than You Think. And when I read that book in the fall of 2012, I was like, I've just got to find a way to share this with the Sunday school class that I teach. We call them campus groups now, but the adult Sunday school class that I teach. So I just, a lot of different things sort of synthesized, and I put it all together, borrowing some from Charles Colson, borrowing some from John Ortberg, other authors that I really admire, Max Lucado, and, of course, some things that my own experiences. And I kind of wove it all in together, and it started off as literally a 2-page handout that I would give every Sunday morning when I taught the class. And here's what we're going to do today, and it was in this series. And over a period of time, everybody's putting them in their 3-ring binders. That's just what we do when we write it ourselves at our church. And it just clicked with a lot of people. And they, at the end of the lesson series, they were like, you just need to do something with this one. And, of course, I then tried to submit my manuscript to multiple Christian publishers and got rejection letter after rejection letter. And so, anyway, that's how I stumbled across the idea of writing. I never set out to say I'm going to be an author and I'm going to be published. No, I was almost 50 years old when I kind of stumbled across doing this.
Well, honey, I was 50. It was 56 when I published my first book, and I've been writing it since the 90s. So it doesn't matter when you do it, because everything is in God's time. It's not in our time.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And listening to you talk about your journey, it brings to mind a phrase, and that is, anybody can be religious. Not everybody can have faith.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
I agree with that.
And when I say that, religion, anybody can have a religion about anything. You can be religious about going to football games. You can be religious about going to the grocery store. You can be religious about watching a certain show on TV all the time. But faith is something different. Faith is believing in something that you cannot see, but you see the evidence of it. And listening to you talk about your journey, I don't think that you use the phrase I stumbled upon. I don't think that you stumbled upon it. I think that your faith led you to the path that you needed to take, that doors were opened, again, not by miracle, but by divine providence. God had the plan. He just wanted you to follow it, and he just fed you little nuggets to go here, go there. No, you can't be a pilot, but you can do this. And just like when God told Jonah to go to Nineveh, and Jonah said, they're not going to listen to me. So Jonah did his own thing and wound up in the belly of the whale. God had the plan. All Jonah had to do was follow it.
You're exactly right. Yeah, you're right. When I say stumble across it, you're right. I just meant that, I didn't have a lot of forethought put into it. It wasn't a matter of I'm going to do this and I'm going to be successful. Instead, it was, just like you said, while I was going about my business of serving in the church, doing what I'm supposed to do, a simple teacher of a Sunday school class, while I was doing that, the Lord had another plan, and that's kind of how we got to where we are, and this book got published. And it's interesting, you mentioned Jonah. He is one of the subjects of one of my chapters, chapter 2 in my book. Here's a little self-promotion here. See, I'm trying to get better at this. You're helping me out, Yvonne. In chapter 2, I do mention Jonah, and there is the chapter on spiritual hiding. It's the idea that he was sort of trying to hide from God, which is kind of humorous if you think about it. If you believe in God and who he really is, you can't exactly hide from him. And so the idea is he was trying to hide from God. He was trying to get away from God, and God had a plan for him, and it made his life harder that he tried to run from him. So, yeah, I haven't tried to necessarily hide from him. It's just that I also have been a little bit like Moses, almost like a reluctant servant. Like, God says, I want you to do this. He may or may not reveal it to me as clearly as I sometimes need him to hit me upside the head with a 2x4. I don't listen real well sometimes. I mean, he's putting all these road signs in my path, and I'm not paying attention. So that's kind of how I feel. I sort of stumble across it. The signs were there, Andy. Why didn't you just go the way God was leading you? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
Wasn't paying attention to the road sign. Like blowing through a stop sign at a four-way stop. We just blow through it because we're not paying attention to what we're supposed to be doing. And
that's right.
When something happens, it's easy to have faith when everything in our life is rosy and we're sitting on top of the mountain and we can raise our hand to God and say, oh, God, you're great. Look at all this I have. But when we are literally and spiritually stripped naked and bare, our faith goes away with clothes.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Let's talk about David. You and I talked about David before we went live. David was loved by God, and David had all kinds of faith until David disobeyed God, and then David was punished for it, and then he lost his faith.
Yeah,
we have to understand. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Well, I was just going to say,
no.
I mentioned that exact story in chapter 8, and that chapter is called Spiritual Amnesia. And I reflect on David, like, how can someone who was such a strong person in the faith, who, defended his own sheep as a teenager against the lion and the bear, and then slew Goliath and was chosen to be king of Israel and had this huge empire and really had all this stuff going for him, how could he have spiritual amnesia and suddenly decide that he would throw all that away for an affair with Bathsheba, and then wound up committing all kinds of deceitful things, murdering her husband, lying to other people, just all the things that happened? You just look at someone like that and you just go, how does that happen? And so that is part of the inspiration for this book. The idea of Coram Deo is that you live in the presence with the understanding, with the realization and the conscious understanding every day that you are living in the presence of God. You're living before his face every day, all the time. And so that should change your behavior. And it's not that he's this overbearing teacher or father or judge. Instead, he's this loving father who's trying to take care of you, trying to lead you down the right path, and is blessing you in many ways. And even in the dark times, he's still there with you, even when it feels like he's not. And so anyway, yeah, that story is one of those motivational ones for me, is seeing David in that way. And I had my own experience with that. My dad, and I mentioned this in the first chapter, or maybe it's the introduction, my dad had a similar experience and left the faith, left my mom after being married to her for 30 years. And I was in my first year of college, and it shocked me. He was my spiritual mentor. He was my dad. He was somebody I looked up to. And out of the blue, he just walked out of our life. And you just kind of go, what? How does that happen?
Because we're humans and we have free will and we have human frailties, and sometimes it's easier to walk the dark path than it is to walk in the path of light. That's
right. You're exactly right. And so I can't be, we've reconciled, and my dad has passed away many years ago, but it is one of those things that it was a testing of my faith. It was a realization that you're never really get away from temptation. You're never going to be, perfect. But what my defense against that is to try to live coram Deo, try to live in the presence of God every day, so that I don't do the same thing. I am exactly my dad's age when he did what he did, and I can't put myself above that. I can't say it could never happen to me. I had a preacher tell us years and years ago, when you say that something like that can't happen to you, you're tempting fate. It's like the people that said the Titanic can't be sunk. It's like somebody greasing the frying pan. That's what you're doing. You're greasing the frying pan for Satan to put you on that frying pan. So I don't say that. I don't say that it can never happen to me. It could happen to me.
You're tempting God, and He tells us, don't be tempting me. Do not tempt me.
Yeah, well, He says, don't test me. Yeah, you're right. I just don't want to ever act like I'm better than anybody else. I could make the exact same mistake that my dad made. So that's part of this book, is to say, it's to help us become better Christians, better followers of Jesus, to remember these things and to make them our life habits. That's the idea of the book.
And that also brings me full circle back to Jonah, back to David, back to Saul, who became Paul, in that when we fall away, and we all do because we're human, God does not leave us, we leave Him. But in that, we have to learn two things. One, forgiveness of self, because we can't expect God to forgive us if we don't forgive ourselves first. And two, forgiveness of others if we expect reciprocation from God. And as humans, those are the two hardest things to do.
You're exactly right. And I dedicated my book to my mother, who just passed away this last September, and she would have taken my father back, even though he did what he did. On the day that he died, up until the day he died, she would have taken him back with open arms. My mother modeled that love that Jesus had better than anyone I've ever seen. Maybe it's just because I was closer to her and saw her live this life out, but she was married to him for 30 years. And I'm telling you, she would have forgiven him and taken him back until the day he died. And that is, in my funny way of saying it is, that's what I want to be like when I grow up. Spiritually, I want to be where she is, and I'm working on it. But she had a way of forgiving people and seeing the best in people, and just like that is modeling the faith, the faith and the forgiveness nature of Jesus. And I want to be like that. I'm working on it.
That is called unconditional love.
That's right.
And that is what God has for us, but we fail to have for ourselves and everyone else. I love you as long as you do what I want you to do, or think the way I think, or act the way I want you to act. But if you screw up, I don't love you anymore. I'm not going to forgive you. You're out of my life. That's not what God says.
That's right.
We are
You're exactly
to
right.
7 times 7.
Mm-hmm.
And explain to folks what that means.
Well, it means that we have to remind ourselves, just like you said, of what Jesus has said. Every single time someone asks us to forgive them, or even if they don't, we have to find a way in our heart to forgive them. And the best way to do that is to remind ourselves, I am before the face of God. I know all the grace He's extended to me and the mercy He's extended to me. How can I not extend that same grace and love and forgiveness to that person? So it's not always easy. Like you said, we're human. We're frail. But we have got to do that because, Jesus clearly says that if you don't forgive others the way I've forgiven you, then you're going to have judgment. And we don't want to be judged. We want to have God's grace. We want to have God's grace. And if there's any judgment at all, we're in big trouble for us. So that's what we have to live in, is that constant awareness of God's grace and forgiveness and mercy.
And that brings me to another point. I would rather live believing in God and finding out there's not really one than live not believing with God and finding out there is one and not having that grace, not having that forgiveness, and not having that mercy, because that as human beings, we are made in His image. And as human beings, we have the capability of those traits if we allow them to bloom. That's
right. You're exactly right. I think that thing you just said is called something like Pascal's wager or Pascal's thing. He's a great apologist who basically said to a person who was an unbeliever, if you are wrong, the consequences are horrendous if you don't believe in God, and I do. But if, on the other hand, I'm wrong and you're right and we all just die and we're just dust, then what have I lost? I've chosen to live for God during my life here on this earth, and if that turns out to be a fallacy and there is no God, then we all just die and we all rot in our grave and that's it. But if it turns out that I am right, the believer, and you, the unbeliever, is wrong, oh my goodness, the consequences are horrendous. So yeah, you're exactly right. That's I'd rather live that way too. And I give God all the some people say, well, is that to be taken literally or not literally? I'd rather err on the side of taking things literally with God, because I'm going to take Him at His word. If it turns out later, He says, well, some of that was just a story to tell you, to make you understand. It wasn't literal. I'd rather err on the side of taking everything literally, because I think that's the truth. But it's sort of like Pascal's wager in a little different way. So I believe my faith is very deep, and I believe every word of the Bible, and I believe it's the inspired word of God, and it affects how I live. And I'm not perfect by any means, but that's going to be how I live my life from now on.
on that same note, Andy, we all in our lives, we have trials and tribulations, we have successes, we have things that are not so successful. I cannot talk. We have death, we have illness. There's things that happen in our life. And I would rather, like you, err on the side of caution to believe in the things that I cannot see, but I see the evidence of, because without that faith, I would not have survived the deaths that I have survived in my life, the death of my 13-year-old granddaughter, the death of my father 6 weeks later, the death of my sister 4 years earlier, the death of 5 aunts back to back in between that time. To be able to say that I believe that there is an entity that understands my pain, because he also suffered loss. He understands how I feel, the anger, the hurt, the sorrow, the loss. And all I have to do is give it to him, and he will get me through it, as opposed to someone who falls down into that pit of despair despair because the loss is so great, they can never find the acceptance that is necessary to move on.
Absolutely. And you just set me up to talk about, I actually mentioned that in chapter 4, and I call it God-forsaken times. And there's some wonderful writers that have written about this, including C.S. Lewis, Dr. James Dobson, and I pull together a bunch of quotes from them and go through the book of Job at a high level. And that, it sounds like, I'm sorry for your loss, sounds like you have been through some very difficult times. And that is exactly what the story of Job, I think, is to teach us, that we can have our faith and it can stay intact, and we don't have to curse God in those situations, even when he lost his whole family except for his wife, he lost his possessions, he lost his health, and he didn't understand why all those things were happening. He only understood his lower story of what was going on, and yet he never, ever cursed God. He always believed in God through that whole thing, and we have to be like that. And James Dobson calls that the betrayal barrier. We have to get past the idea that God has betrayed us when bad things happen. If you go down that downward spiral, and think God has caused all this and is punishing you and doing terrible things or whatever, it is a wrong expectation, because a lot of people think that once you become a Christian, everything is rainbows and butterflies and puppy dogs and all that, and that is not the case at all. Jesus warned us at the very beginning, in his gospel messages. He said, in this world you will have trouble, and he also promises us that he'll be with us. But he says, I've overcome the world, and that's our hope, is that he's going to be with us through all that, and that this life is passing. And anyway, I really do get into that. It was kind of a dark chapter 4, but I enjoyed writing it so much because it was therapeutic to me. I've suffered from depression, suffered from loss, just like everybody else. And it was very therapeutic, because sometimes you do get, and I don't like to say negative things about the church, but sometimes in church you do get that platitude of, oh, just pray more, or just, you get those trite little things that people say to you, and they're not helpful, even though they're trying to be helpful. I don't think they're trying to be mean, but what we really need to do is have a realistic view of what this world is supposed to be and is going to be. We live in a fallen world. We live in a world of death and decay and sin and rot. That mean we need to be, like Eeyore, going through life and, oh, miserable me or whatever. But we have to have a realistic approach to know that there's a better life for us after this life, and we've got to live it the best we can, and we've got to live it for God, and we're going to need to rely on him, just like you said. You said you got through all that difficulty. You got through all that because of your faith. You were leaning on your faith. I think I heard you say that. That's what we need to do. In this time of year, when people are struggling, this is the first year I've been without my mother, and it was a little weird. It was very difficult this year, because Christmas was her favorite time of year. But the way we get through it is we remember that we grieve for them, but we can grieve with hope, knowing that one day we're going to see them again, and God has something better in store for us. So that's my little message. I know that might not be deep enough, but read chapter 4. it helps.
The thing is, when we feel that, when we believe that death's the end, that there's nothing after that, we have nothing to hope for.
That's right.
And
you nailed it. Yeah, you nailed it. Hope.
We have to understand that if we are where we are supposed to be with God, who is in reality our Father, then we hope for the hereafter. And we look for being eternally alive with him. So when this body, which gets diseased and messed up and goes away, we as humans have a soul. And I've heard people argue, well, we're just going to die and that's going to be the end of it. Well, that's what happens with the animals because they don't have the ability to reason. That we're created in God's image. We have a soul. Where does that soul go? It just doesn't go into oblivion. It goes somewhere. And
That's exactly right.
God created me in his image. God gave me a soul. This soul belongs to him. It's only here on borrowed time.
You're exactly right. And we all, Paul, as Christians, we all believe that we're all going to go to a better place, and then we are going to be reunited with those loved ones who have gone on before us who are also believers. And that's all through the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament. The phrase "gathered to his people" or "gathered to their people." That whole concept is that used way back with Abraham and David and others. That's what happens when we die. We are going to be gathered to our people who have gone on before us. And Paul, the Apostle Paul, said, no matter what kind of trials we go through here in this world, they don't have, as bad as it is here, it doesn't, compare to the greatness that we're going to experience in heaven. So that's our hope. That's what we hope for, and that's what gets us through our difficulties in this world.
And that's why when all of this happened, and to add to this mix, my husband had to have colon cancer surgery. Well,
oh no.
He also has all these other hosts of illnesses. He's insulin dependent, diabetic, high blood pressure, has 2 working arteries in his heart. So having surgery was a very high risk. Told me was this: Yvonne, I would rather die on the table than live and suffer with the cancer and put you through it. We were both okay with that. And the reason we were okay with that is because I'm not in control. This is where people get messed up. We are not in control of our lives. We can only control those things we can control. God is in control. I turned it over to God and said, God, whatever your will is, it is your will. It is not my will. I can't control this. It's up to you. And when we say we turn things over to God, if we really do it, then we have to, A, forget about it, and B, live with what happens. Because it was supposed to happen.
You're exactly right. Yeah, and that's part of that faith. That's that stepping out in faith, as opposed to things that are black and white and perfect and easy or whatever. Instead, stepping out in faith, you don't really know the future. You are trusting in faith that God's going to come through and he knows what's best, and you're just going to have to accept what he has in store for us. So, yeah, you're exactly right. That's good. How is your husband now? I got to ask, how is he doing now?
Well, all the colon cancer's gone. He didn't have to have any radiation or any chemo because the team of doctors that we had, and again, I believe in divine providence because the anesthesiologist that we had for the colonoscopy and the endoscopic, I talked to her at great length. She and I were on the same page. She understood what needed to be done. So when it came time for the surgery, I asked for her, and she agreed. The surgeon that we had, he had done cancer surgery on my daughter, so I already knew his work. I trusted him. And my husband's heart doctor, I've known for almost 15 years, and he and I have an understanding. Again, because I could not have picked these 3 individuals on any given day to come together to take care of my husband.
Yep, God's providence again. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're back to this thing of faith, that it is the evidence of things hoped for. It is the. See, I can't even talk anymore. You got to quote it for me.
It's the evidence
things
of
that
things
we don't
hoped for. Yeah, and I got to look for it now. It's Hebrews 11. I got to look for it real quick. Now, faith is the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. So, yeah,
there you go.
If you have it, if you already have it in your hand, there's no faith in that. Instead, it's confidence in what we're hoping for, even though we don't see it. And so, yeah, that's the faith that we have to step out in. We can't wait till everything is perfect and everything is in front of our face and clearly defined and all in black and white. Instead, there are times you have to step out in faith and trust the Lord. And that's hard. That's not natural. It's it's against our grain, if you will, as humans.
and we have to realize that there are many things that we have absolutely no control over. And no matter all the worry in the world, all the fretting in the world, all the anger in the world, all the depression in the world, all the banging our head against the door or the wall will not change it. We have to literally give it up to God, who sees way down the road. To him, time is irrelevant. A day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years in a day. He sees everything all the time. So his will is not always our will. We have to let him have it. And we have to stop worrying about it and say, thy will be done.
Absolutely.
And I think that your book is a lot of that. And it also talks about God's discipline, and he disciplines us all the time because we are such stubborn creatures and rowdy children. Just like a parent, he disciplines us, and we have to accept that discipline and learn from it, because if we don't, it's the sign of insanity. You keep doing the same things over and over again and expect a different result, just like Saul before he became Paul, and Jonah in the belly of the whale, and Moses. Poor Moses, he just couldn't accept the fact that God would take care of it. He's going to get all these extra people to help him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I use, I don't disagree with anything you just said. When I use the word discipline of Coram Deo in the title, I'm referring to it's a spiritual discipline that we learn, kind of like the discipline we learn of a regiment of things I want to do. Like in the new year, I want to exercise 2 days during the week and once on the weekend. That's a regiment I want to follow, and then you get more detailed and say, okay, I want to do arm exercises on this day and leg exercises on that way. Well, with spiritual disciplines, the book goes through a bunch of different ways, and some of them are fun. Some of them are really fun. Like one discipline is that I mentioned, and I got this from other people, but it's so much fun, is you make a list of things you're thankful for. I mean, really sit down. Everybody said, I'm going to give you 5 or 6 things I'm thankful for. I mean, sit down and shoot for 100. It's not that hard, but once you get into the 50s and 60s and 70s, you're just like, oh my goodness, I forgot about that. I didn't think about that. And then put that list somewhere and look at it again next year, or look at it again 2 months from now. And so you find that your life becomes so rich with blessings. It's the whole, that old hymn, count your blessings one by one. That's one of the spiritual disciplines. If you're struggling with life, sometimes it helps to look at all the blessings God has given you. And, I mean, my list is so eclectic. It's got everything from Coca-Cola to bananas to, it's sometimes it's food. It's, cats and dogs and horses and, whatever. It's all kinds of different things that I'm thankful for. I'm thankful, for, of course, for my family and my upbringing and things like that. But that's one discipline. Another one is, spiritual memorials. When something big has happened in your life, the Bible often, God said, okay, you've just crossed the Jordan. I want everybody to put stones up here, pile them up. And then when your kids say, why are those stones piled up over there? You tell them the story of what happened today. Well, why don't you do that for yourself? Why don't you do the same thing? Why don't you save things? I'm a saver. Maybe I'm a pack rat. Some people might say I'm a hoarder or whatever, but I save things that mean something to me, and I put them somewhere where I can see it. I'm sitting in my office, and I'm looking at an old piece of wood that a Sunday school teacher cut for me in the shape of my name, Andy, from 1975. It means something to me. It was precious to me. This man taught me important things about the Bible. I've got a homemade painting on the wall from one of my students. Her name is Debbie. She painted that for me, a couple of years ago, and I look at it and I remember the blessing that I have of being able to have a wonderful relationship with her and that whole class. I've got a poem that was written by a preacher from my teenage years, Dr. Charles Stovall. And so these are the type things, and it means something to you, and it makes you smile, and it brings you that feeling of, you know what, God has blessed me in so many ways. So spiritual memorials, that's one discipline. Thankful list, that's another discipline. Anyway, there's one at the end of every chapter after about chapter 3, and it just helps you apply the ideas that God gave us in the Bible for being thankful, for remembering things. And so anyway, that's the idea, is that you're going to develop a spiritual discipline that will protect you from doing, making mistakes, having spiritual amnesia. It's not going to make you perfect by any means, but it's to help you walk a better Christian life.
I don't want to cut you short, but we're going to run out of time.
You're kidding me. There's no way we're out of time.
Tell the folks where they can get your book and where you can be found, and will you come back?
I will definitely come back. My book's available on Amazon, both in paperback as well as ebook. It's also available on Barnes & Noble in ebook only. You also can go, I've got a lot of free writings that I've put. There's a website called Teachers Pay Teachers. Just look up my name there. I got about 10 things that I'm giving away out there that you can just print. They're PDF files. And my target audience would be new Christians all the way up to, Sunday school teachers that just are looking for a new idea. Hey, I got to teach a class for 3 weeks, and I just need an idea. Well, here's a free one. You can just download it from teacherspayteachers.com. And I also have a website where I have blog posts. I've got about 90 blog posts that I put out there, my ramblings since about 2015, and it's called SpeakTruth415.org. So that's Speak Truth, and then the number 415, and that's after a spiritual a scripture that's really spiritual to me, important to me in my spiritual life, and that's Ephesians 4:15, that talks about how we're going to speak the truth in love, and by doing that, we're all going to grow spiritually. And that's really what kind of the theme behind everything that I've been trying to do is trying to speak the truth in love, not judgmentally speaking the truth like, I'm going to wag my finger at you and say you're doing something wrong, but instead doing it in love to say, hey, I've made that same mistake. Let me try to help you not make that same mistake, and, speaking the truth from the Scriptures. And that's my idea.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, Andy Daugherty. Check him out on Facebook. Look him up. And believe it or not, we are going to run out of time real quick. I want to thank Andy for joining us tonight. He doesn't know how much he's helped me today. I needed him today. Tomorrow night, graphic designer James Carlson will be with us. And y'all know there's a couple of things I say at the end of every show. One of them is don't just feel special, be special. You want to be different from today, from tomorrow, where you are today, then change what you're doing today. The difference between who you are today and who you want to be is what you do today. So go out and change yourself to be different. And if you want to achieve greatness, please stop asking permission, because nobody's going to give it to you. Your smile is your logo. Your personality is your business card. How you leave others feeling after having had an experience with you, ladies and gentlemen, I promise you that is your trademark. People will forget your name. They look like, they will forget what you're wearing, but they will never, ever, ever forget how you made them feel. And I hope that tonight's show has been both inspiring, educational, aspiring, and that our trademark to you is that you will feel better about yourself. Andy, thank you again so much for joining me. I can't wait to get you back. So and don't hang up when the show goes dark. So tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, join us for graphic designer James Carlson. This is your host, Yvonne Mason, at Off the Chain with my guest author, Andy Daugherty. And we hope and pray that you all are inspired by tonight's show. We'll see you again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. Okay, Andy, the show is going dark, but whatever we say will go up into the archives. But what I wanted to tell you is once we get off the show will archive. When it gets through archiving, I will put the link up on my page and tag you in it. I want you to take the show and spread it everywhere. Tomorrow.
Oh, I'll be glad to do that. Thank you.
Well, it gets better. Tomorrow, I put it up on podcast.com, Podcast Garden, Mixcloud, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. I will also send you those links. I will put them on my page and tag you in them. I can use them. This show also shows up on my YouTube channel under Yvonne Mason, on iTunes under Off the Chain, on Stitcher, on FM.com, and on TuneIn Radio, and on several other podcasts that I don't put it up on, but somebody else does. That's why we have 106,000 plus listeners in over 100 countries.
Wow.
So
well, thank you so much
will be heard.
for inviting me. Thank you so much for inviting me on this show, and I'll certainly come back anytime you want me to, and I'm just really excited about this.
Well, I want to bring you back in the middle of the year, July maybe, because I think this is something that we need to talk about more. We are at an impasse. Actually, we're at a crossroads in our lives as a society, and God gives us over to debauchery and all the other stuff like he used to do the Israelites until people wake up and decide that it's time to come back to him. And I think the time is now.
I totally agree. And I agree with what you were saying. The nation almost went down even worse of a spiral downward. And then this election really did give a lot of people some hope that maybe we're not going to turn the country over to people that don't appreciate it and want to turn it into something different. So, and I don't get political at all. I would only say this to you privately, but I'd be glad to come back anytime you'd like. And so July sounds wonderful, and I will put this thing out on my Facebook page and spread it around. I'll put it on my blog post site, and I'll be trying to find other ways to promote my book. I've not done a very good job of self-promoting, and that's why the sales are not been very good. So, well, I appreciate this opportunity.
No problem. And also, you need to do a follow-up book, and because traditional publishers are idiots, and I say that very honestly because they want us to read what they want us to read, and that's true in the Christian book arena too. If you don't have a name, they don't want to do. But my publisher is always looking for authors, and in this indie world, we have to take care of each other. So I will hook you up with her whenever you're ready to publish another.
That would be wonderful.
And you don't have to buy 5,000 copies either.
Yeah, I didn't have to do that either. With this one, the lady took a risk on me, and she basically said, I'm not going to give you any money up front, but I'm also not going to ask for any money, and I think this book's going to sell, and the agreement is that it has to sell somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 800 copies, and then we begin to share the profit, and it's a 5-year contract, and once she gets her money back through the publication of the books, or the sale of the books, then it switches to I'm earning more than her, and then at the end of the 5 years, it flips to like I get 95% of the money and she gets only 5%. So it sounded like a great deal, but she doesn't market it. That's just not what I do. So I have to market it on my own, and I have a very busy life, full-time job, family, ministry. I don't have time. Once I sold it to all my friends and neighbors and family and loved ones in the church and everything, it just tanked. There's just not been any, maybe 100 copies have sold in the past year and a half, whereas the first 6 months I sold, over 100. But it's just hard to get people to go out and buy it. Anyway, this will help. And I've also got some folks telling me I need to get on local radio and just some local people in the Atlanta area that do say, oh, it's local talent, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll do the same thing you did. They'll interview me and put it on take tidbits of it and put it on the air.
Especially
so
the Christian station.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the Christian stations, and they can put me on in the middle of the night. I don't care when it is. But just to get a few more people reading it, all it would take would be a few churches saying, hey, we want this book, and we're going to teach it in our Sunday school class. Then you're selling 10 and 20 books at a time, and then I could easily make my goal of selling, 500 copies for her, and then I'll start actually making some money off the book. Then I would look at writing another book. I got a number of Sunday school lessons that other people have said, oh, you should do something with this as well. And, we'll talk about doing that. But for now, I just want to get this one sold so that I almost feel like I'm...
What I would do, Andy, I would contact the local churches, Campus Church of Christ in Norcross, the Peachtree Road Church of Christ, the Christian churches. Contact them. You may have to send a sample copy of the book, but contact them and show them what you have to offer.
Well, you know what I did? I went and bought a marketing package from one of those e-distributors, or I forgot what they're called, but they give you all the email addresses and street addresses of all the churches, and I did that. I got this huge file from them, and I began doing that, and I started with the churches that are closest to our faith, Church of Christ, Christian Church, community churches, non-denominational churches. And I tell you, I got zero. I mean, I'm not exaggerating here. I got zero responses from them. I'd send them samples of the book in a PDF file that's all the introduction, all the chapter 1, and then samples of all the other chapters. And I didn't get, after spending $200 on that marketing campaign, I don't think I sold a single book. And I was like, what in the world? I mean,
reach out to the denominational churches. Reach out to the denomination.
That's what I am going to start doing. Yeah, Baptist would be next, and that's a huge group next. So I will do that next. But at that point, that was right around the time my mom got dementia, and I just didn't have the time to market my book anymore at all. And it kind of became a part-time job to take care of my mom.
Another thing, Andy, make the internet your friend. Because the internet is where it's at now. Reach out through the internet. Send emails, send PDF files. Do it. And snail mail is expensive, and most people don't. They use their computer like we used to use snail mail.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it was a PDF file I sent. It was through email that I sent most of those. Only a few did I send actual books to. But anyway, I will do that. And
reach out of state.
Yeah, I definitely will. Once I get my that's going to be my goal in 2018, to really start promoting this book, because I have not done a good job, and now I need to do it, because I'm never going to make any money off of it, and I won't have a chance, I don't think, to go into that second book. But if you want to hook me up with someone who would be interested in publishing a second book, let me know. I mean, that would be something I'd like to start maybe towards the end of 2018, once I get a chance to really sell more books for this original book.
And she won't lock you into a 5-year contract either.
She won't what?
She will not lock you into a 5-year contract.
Yeah. It was either that, or my only other choice was going to be to self-publish, and I just didn't have the $3,000 to buy into that.
You don't have to have $3,000 to self-publish. You and I got to talk. I will hook you up with her.
Well, I might be exaggerating a little bit, but I mean, I remember looking at some of those through Zulon and some of the others, and if you want marketing, I'd be right back in the same boat with no marketing if I chose the $9.99 plan.
No. Also, set up a Facebook page just for the book.
I have that. Yeah, I do have that, and I shared your thing on that. Mhm.
Okay.
It's also called Speak Truth.
Pull up Blog Talk Radio and look for Christian radio shows.
Okay.
And ask to be on there.
I will definitely do that.
And tell them you've been on my show.
Wonderful.
I'll send you some other marketing tips as I think of them.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'd love any kind of marketing tips you can give me.
And all you people listening in archives, let's help Andy out. Let's help him be successful, because that's what this show is all about. Because when the show is archived like that, how people can hear it. So they will hear what we're talking about, and you're going to see a result.
Wonderful.
I believe in it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome. I'll get you back on the show. I'm going to let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for the honor of interviewing you and having a frank discussion about faith, hope, and love and forgiveness.
Thank you so much. You have a great night, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and I'll keep you in my prayers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, honey.